BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast, making sense of things and bringing you all the news, analysis and insight you need in this confusing, weird period between Christmas and New Year. It's Thursday the 28th of December. I'm Liam McLeod and coming up today...
Shankland gets away from Bushiri. Shankland still going, curls it in!
We reflect on an evening of drama on and off the pitch at Easter Road as Lawrence Shankland has the last word.
There's no microphone, so that's above my remit. All I concentrate on is the game.
After the hype, there were no managers mic'd up last night, but do we need more innovation in Scottish football coverage? And...
Wallace swings it in. Oh, it's the header and it's in!
Could we be in for another crucial weekend in the always compelling Scottish Championship?
This is the Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
So hello and welcome to the Scottish Football Podcast. Hope you've had a good Christmas / festive period so far. I'm joined today, as ever, on a Thursday by the Clyde manager Ian McCall. We've also got journalist Adam Miller of the Herald and the Old Firm Facts podcast with us. Hello, guys.
Hi, Liam.
Hey, how you doing?
Good, Ian. I have to say, I was doing the Celtic match at the weekend against Livingston for Sportsound, and I spent half the game updating people on the score at the Rock as Dumbarton and your team, Clyde, played out an 8-goal thriller. What a match that was.
It was. I wouldn't say it was high in quality. The conditions were, really, really appalling up there with the Worcester Broth has got to throw at you. But I remember standing in the driving rain in the wind with a bit going into extra time saying, look, we just wanted the ref to blow the whistle and get out of there. And then luckily we scored 2 goals. But I think that's the draw was the least we deserved. It was the players from both sides and all the supporters deserved a lot of credit because the conditions were horrendous. And to serve up that little bit of excitement at the end and during the game and 8 goals, it's all credit to them, you know.
Doesn't get any easier for Ian's team. They're up against the league leader Stenhousemuir this weekend. Adam, do you have a nice Christmas?
Yeah, very pleasant. How about yourself?
Oh yes, very quiet. As quiet as it can be with a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old running around. But, you know, we get on with it. So I'm not one to moan. Right, we'll get on to all the stuff from last night, in particular that Edinburgh derby in just a moment. Let's quickly run through today's Scottish football headlines. Well, Hearts need to handcuff Lawrence Shankland in a room so he doesn't go anywhere in January, according to the former Tynecastle winger Neil McCann. His comments come after the league's top scorer got the only goal of the game in the 93rd minute of last night's Edinburgh derby. Storm Gerrit, though, led to the postponement of Aberdeen Motherwell and Rangers Ross County. We have yet to get news of new dates for those fixtures. Livingston and St Johnstone drew 0-0 at Ammanvale. Kilmarnock beating St Mirren 1-0 in Paisley. Fantastic result for Derek McInnes' side there. And the Celtic coach Harry Kewell's been given a leave of absence from the club as he remains in talks with Japanese J-League side Yokohama F. Marinos about becoming their new manager. And of course that side in Yokohama is where Celtic got Ange Postecoglou from a couple of years ago now. Let's discuss the Edinburgh derby first though, and we'll start with the action on the pitch. Ian, I covered the game for Sportsound last night. It was dramatic. I'm not sure the quality was of the highest order, unfortunately. Not that Hearts or Lawrence Shankland will be complaining about that. What did you make of the match itself?
Well, I don't. You were there, Liam. I watched it on TV. I take it the conditions, it was windy and things, and I think that can give the players some sort of excuse. But I thought it was very exciting. I thought it was 100 miles an hour. I didn't think, they always say the derbies, whether it's Rangers Celtic, Hibs Hearts, Ayr United, Kilmarnock, Dunfermline Wraith, it's always very quick and therefore there's maybe not a lot of football. It was defined by one moment of quality. But I thought the first 15 minutes were incredible. The 2 guys missing penalties who are usually, I think Lawrence has scored 15 in a row. Mm-hmm. And I think Martin Boyle's good from the spot as well. So I think a draw would probably been fair. But in that a game of that magnitude, you're not really caring. You're talking to the ex-Dundee D United manager who in 7 derbies lost 4 and drew 3 and didn't win one. So, it was defined by a marvellous finish and a marvellous bit of skill from Lawrence.
Who you know extremely well. Obviously, he was your go-to man at Ayr United for so long. And that goal he scored last night was magnificent. And it follows off the back of another magnificent goal he scored against St Mirren at the weekend. Hearts have had this accusation this season of being not quite a one-man team, but being so reliant on him. It's no surprise to you that this guy is now, obviously smashing it at the top level.
No, it's not. I mean, I think he's always been a wee bit, not under the radar, but I don't think people appreciated how good his all-round play was. I remember, he won't mind me saying this, I remember sitting in the ubiquitous chip with Steven Gerrard and Gary McAllister and trying to persuade them to take Lawrence. At that point, they could have got him for nothing, and they were very, very close, but didn't do it. And I think it's only when you work with him, you realise that his all-round game is so good. I mean, his last 2 goals have both been scored with his left foot, which is the weaker of the two. And it was interesting, Neil McCann saying that, because I remember when Neil was manager in D, we went up there and we beat him 3-0 and Lawrence scored twice. And he bid 50 grand for him, to which we laughed at and moved on. Listen, it'll come down to how much it's going to take to move him, I think, for him to go. I think if they put a price tag... Hearts are in a tough position. I mean, if they put a price tag of $5 million on him, then a new contract has got to be forthcoming that is in line with a £5 million player. So, I mean, I'm plucking that figure out because I've read it in the media. I don't know what it would be, but I don't think Hearts are a one-man team, but the stats would suggest, in terms of, you probably know Liam, he must have, in the last 2 months, I mean, he must have scored almost 90% of Hearts goals or something like that, something crazy like that. He deserves everything he gets. His first game for us was at Wraith Rovers, and he scored. And his next 50 games, he scored 51 goals. So he's always going to put the ball in the back of the net, and he's getting everything he deserves now for how hard he's worked, because he was almost lost to the game, and he's come through the hard way. It's not as if he's spent a lot of time playing at Rangers and Celtic earning serious money. So he deserves everything he gets, because he's an outstanding boy as well as an outstanding player.
It's an interesting one. 18 months left in his contract. That is an interesting one, because, when it comes to making money out of him, and I don't know how Hearts view Lawrence Shankland. Do they view him as a possible sellable asset, or is he there primarily to try and get them into European group stage football, which could actually bring in even more money for them? But 18 months, they've only really got another 2 windows where they could potentially make money out of Lawrence Shankland. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Do you see Lawrence Shankland leaving Hearts next month?
From Lawrence's point of view, I could see it happening. From Heart of Midlothian, I just don't think it can happen. I don't know the actuality of what getting to the group stage is worth. They'll weigh that up with what transfer fee they can get. Let's be honest, within Scotland, there's only 2 clubs could pay the money. I think I know where Lawrence's preferred destination would be. You never know what would happen south of the border. But, from Lawrence's point of view, I think he's got to be really happy in his work, and I think he is there. But he's got to recognise as well, and I'm sure he does, he has a young family, and although he's made a good living out of football, I think a destination of somebody that's going to pay 4 or 5 million for him, you don't need to be rocket science to realise that his wages would quadruple. And so I think Hearts will have a decision to make. And the biggest problem for Hearts is, and Joe Savage and Andrew McKinley, is if they value him at £5 million, if they offer him a new contract, that's got to reflect that. And that would take it, I think, beyond Hearts' wage structure. I don't think Lawrence will let it affect him. I think he'll keep putting the ball in the back of the net and playing well, because he'll have one eye in the Euros, which for me looks like a bit of a certainty now to be one of the strikers. It'll be very interesting. I think there will be bids. In fact, I'm not even sure there hasn't been 1 or 2 already. He'll have a decision to make. Well, will he have a decision to make? Hearts will make the decision first, and then Lawrence will have a decision to make. I can see him going, but if he goes for Hearts, it needs to be early on in the transfer window. Could Lawrence go and bring in Van Veen in a short-term contract for Hearts? Who knows?
And just one more. You're saying if he's got a decision to make, if he does have a decision to make, what would be your advice to him as his former manager?
Well, if it was, for example, if it was Rangers and they offered the required money and he had a chance to make 4 times what he's earning. He's 28, 29 now. I think playing for Rangers, he'd score over 30 goals in a season, stayed fit. I think it's a short career, Liam. I think he's got to go.
Adam, did you watch the match? And if so, what did you make of it?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a classic. I don't think you could... It was strange because it was a very dramatic, as Ian said, very dramatic first sort of 15, 20 minutes and then a really dramatic ending. But there wasn't too much excitement, for the sort of massive kind of bulk in the middle. But it was, I think, probably on balance, just about deserved for Hearts. I think the difference is that while they weren't necessarily playing brilliantly for the whole match, they had that extra bit of quality up front. And also, I think Zander Clark shouldn't be overlooked. His performance last night, I thought it was really solid, not just with the penalty. And after the game, Stephen Naismith was making a good point about his kind of mentality, Zander Clark, with Craig Gordon coming back and all the expectation you have of a club legend, a Scottish football legend coming back from that serious injury and all the hype around that. He's kind of just kept his performances up. And for all that Hearts are struggling to score goals outside of Lawrence Shankland, they're also conceding very few goals. I think it's something like 15 they've conceded this season. So I think they are possibly overly reliant on a couple of players in Shankland and Zander Clark, but I think it was just that extra bit of quality they had.
Another talking point from last night was the TV coverage. And of course, Sky, the broadcasters, were planning to have Nick Montgomery wearing a mic for the duration of the game. I think his assistant was to be wearing a body cam. Those plans were ditched relatively late in the day. The broadcaster, I think, blamed the SFA. Chris Sutton, who was working for them, was on social media. He called it an embarrassment and having a pop at the Football Association. The SFA then released a statement last night denying they'd blocked the move, saying it collapsed due to an IFAB rule that restricts the use of electronic communication involving players and coaching staff. Adam, is this something you were looking forward to lugging into?
I was curious to see how it would go. I think it was something probably more for entertainment value than for anything of any kind of real significance that we might have learned from it. I think it would have been more interesting or more beneficial to have referees and match officials mic'd up, and we could have maybe learnt a wee bit more from that. I don't think anyone comes out of it looking great, given how short notice the whole thing was cancelled at. And you mentioned, obviously, Chris Sutton's comments about it. I think there's potentially sometimes a risk of trying to innovate a bit too much and giving us things that we're not necessarily asking for. For instance, during the game last night, Frankie Kent, the Hearts player, was interviewed coming off the pitch at half-time, and the interview lasted literally 12 seconds, and he just said, yeah, it's been really hectic out there, and I'm not really sure what that added to anyone's experience. I think in terms of innovation, I think all people are really asking for is that pundits are informed and engaged.
Right, let's look at last night's other matches. A really impressive result on the road for Kilmarnock. They've had so many issues since promotion away from home. But that's a win at Pittodrie and now a win in Paisley. And St Mirren had only lost once this season inside their own stadium. That was against Rangers. And another terrific victory for Derek McInnes, Ian.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why it's such a surprise to everybody that Derek McInnes is doing so well. I mean, his whole record would suggest, I'm looking at the form table, and he's only behind Rangers because they've won the last 5 in a row. Derek's had 4 wins and a draw. So, yeah, I mean, I think I think at the start of the season he said we need to have more of an impact on the big two, Celtic and Rangers, which I think unarguably they've done. And we need to improve our way form. And I think that's 4 clean sheets in a row. So, yeah, they're looking at a really, really strong outfit. They've got a lot of younger guys at the back who I think, Lewis Mayo, Dees, who've come through the hard way, but they're both good players, a lot of pace. And they look a good bet for the top 6. Terrific result for them.
Yeah, and of course beating Celtic a couple of times this season as well. It's all looking good for Kilmarnock. Livingston's still struggling, 11 without a win now after the goalless draw against St Johnstone. I guess, Adam, it'll probably be Saints who'll be happier with the point there, given they were away from home, given it's on the AstroTurf.
Yeah, I think they'll be pleased with a point. I think the situation at Livingston I think they had an attendance of about 1,600 last night. Obviously, you take the weather into account, but still, I don't think it suggests that people are particularly excited about where they are right now, bottom of the league, 4 points behind Motherwell, I think, 11 games a win. They're just, obviously St Johnstone will be pleased to come away from any away fixture with a point, but I don't think Livingston are in a particularly good place at the moment, and it's another disappointing result for them.
You're listening to the Scottish Football Podcast.
Now, just finally on the Scottish Football Podcast, and before we let Ian go, it's another big weekend in the Championship. And Ian, two of your former teams, Dundee United and Partick Thistle, you know the clubs so well. They meet at Tannadice Friday night, tomorrow evening. A game that'll be on Sports Scene on the BBC Scotland channel from 7:30. It's second against third. Who needs to win this one mostly, do you think?
Well, listen, I think Dundee United do. I think because of the 2 or 3 results they've had recently, and to try and keep in touch with Raith Rovers up at the top. Raith have got Arbroath at home on the Saturday. I know there's no game in the Championship that's a gimme, but Chris Doolan will be looking at it as not last chance, but I do think if Dundee United win, then the top 2 are away. I mean, that's just arithmetically a fact.
Yeah. But
the Championship is such a bizarre league, and I think they won 2-1 in the League Cup up there earlier in the season. I wouldn't rule out, I fancy Thistle to win, and I wouldn't rule them out making inroads into both Raith and Dundee United. I think if they do win, you know, they'd be 3 points behind, 3 or 4 points behind. Dundee United obviously have a game in hand, but you still got to win that. But it'll be a great game. I'm looking forward to watching the TV. Both teams like to, I was nearly saying play the game the right way, and if I did, I would have shot myself. So, but I think they both like to get forward and try and score goals. And it's a tough one to call, but I have a sneaky feeling that Thistle will edge this.
In the other games, Ayr United, another of Ian's old teams, Dunfermline, another side who are just trying to push themselves towards that 4th spot. Morton travel to Cally Thistle, Queen's Park are at home to Airdrie. Raith Rovers, the league leaders, against Arbroath. Cally Thistle are in need of a win. We talked about this last week, actually, Ian, at this time last week, and they'd kind of fallen away a little bit, but looking to take on a Morton side who have really hit their straps recently. Yeah,
they have. The straps, I got that. Since they signed Lewis Strapp,
yes.
Made 3 goals from long throws. Yeah, I mean, I was told the friends of mine were at the game against Thistle, said they were very unlucky not to win the game. Yeah, the manager bounce has stopped a little bit, but you know they are close down to that playoff position, but they're pretty close to 4th place as well. That's the nature of the league. I think the Queen's Park is the one for me. I think they're in danger of really falling away unless they get a 3 points soon. I mean, it's quite incredible that they've got 14 points. It's nearly the new year, and they won the first 3 games of the season. So I think they need a boost. The Inverness Morton game, that'll be a tough game for Inverness because Dougie, after a sticky spell, I think he's got 1 or 2 players back, and they seem to be, 3 wins in a week, and they shot to 5th place. So that's a tough one to call.
We shall see full coverage on Sportsound across the weekend, and as I say, that match at Tannadice live on the BBC Scotland channel on Friday evening. That's all we've got time for on the Scottish Football Podcast just now. My thanks to Ian McCall and Adam Miller, who joined us earlier on, and thank you for listening. Sportsound and BBC Radio Scotland, as I say, full coverage of all the weekend's games, including that derby match in Glasgow and some huge fixtures elsewhere. Sports Scene will have all the highlights on Saturday evening. Keep your emails on any subject at all coming into scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk, at scottishfootball@bbc.co.uk. And if you haven't done so already, subscribe and follow the Scottish Football Podcast so you don't miss an episode. Bye for now.
Just a quick word to say the Scotland Rugby Podcast is now available every Tuesday. Join me, Andy Burke and Tom English for everything you need to know about the world of Scottish rugby. Just head to BBC Sounds and subscribe to the Scotland Rugby Podcast.